Welcome back to another episode of Thursday's Thoughts with Jake. This is a Bourbon Lens production. We're so glad to have you all here. In this week's episode, we are going to be talking about bourbon made in Arizona. So sit back and buckle into the latest episode of Thursday Thoughts. Lauren, Devin, thank you for joining to talk a little bit about the Arizona Bourbon Trail and what you all are creating in the southwestern part of the United States. So I really appreciate you joining me to have a conversation about what's happening in Arizona.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having us too. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Arizona Bourbon Trail, as everyone should know and hopefully knows that bourbon can be made anywhere in the US. Kentucky, got us started, which is awesome. We thank them for that. They are more known for it as they should be. But since then, we've had a lot of great distilleries pop up and start making some delicious bourbon. My dad's actually from Kentucky, so we've done the Kentucky Bourbon Trail multiple times. Had an absolute blast doing it, made some great memories. And now my dad's moving here. And so I had this idea to make him a fun little home away from home bourbon trail here in Arizona. And ended up finding out that we actually have 13 distilleries that make their own bourbon here in Arizona. Kind of spread out throughout the whole state. But that's what started this whole thing. And spent a lot more time on it than I expected, but loved every minute of it. And I'm thinking, if I'm making this, why not share it with not only Arizona, but even the world so that they're aware of what's going on here. And yeah, so that's pretty much how it got started.
Yeah, so it is exciting. And you said, something that we hear all the time, and it's kind of funny, not all bourbon's made in Kentucky. A lot of bourbon is made in Kentucky, thanks to
Mostly.
a lot of the heritage here.
Yeah.
But there is craft whiskey being made across the country. And some people may know Arizona from some of the American single malts, right? Whiskey Del Bach may have put Arizona a little bit on the map for us
Mhm.
personally here at the Bourbon Lens and seeing what the team has created in Tucson. So for you all, as you all kind of are trying to find a voice in the wilderness, for lack of better terms, what was the big thing for you all to do to start this, right? Because you could go a lot of different ways, but when you pulled out that first arrow out of your quiver and you went to shoot it, what was your first idea of how do we organize this?
Okay. Well, Lauren's more organizational than me, so I'll speak to it anyways, right? So I'll do my
He
best
he
here.
knows how much work I was doing and like disappearing and like
I've seen the stress, so I'll speak to the stress, right? So, as she stated, this whole idea was her dad moving from Kentucky to Arizona, and us going out and doing the Bourbon Trail several times. Majority of the Bourbon Trail, we've been through it, and we wanted to give him a birthday gift, right? Like, so we started looking up distilleries in Arizona. And well, let me rephrase that. Lauren started looking up distilleries in Arizona, right? And it was, a big list. And we, even big bourbon drinkers out here, didn't know that there were so many distilleries in Arizona. Some of them can be a little bit spread out, and you get the same thing in Kentucky because all the distilleries are on acres, right? And eventually we got our list from, like 25 down to like 13 that were actually active, right?
yeah, a lot of them closed unfortunately during COVID
Or
and
were
other
bought
deals
out, et cetera, et
changed. Same as
cetera.
what happens in Kentucky too. But
Well, Kentucky, right? Like the last year and a half has been rough for a lot of producers. We've had Garrard County go belly up. Luca Mariano's dealing with some things out kind of towards Wilderness Trail on the eastern part of the trail. So there's a lot. No one's immune. Even if bourbon is one of the biggest spirits in the world, no one's immune from a over distillation perspective.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, it's crazy. I even just saw Four Roses was thinking about selling here, which to me I was like, really? Like I couldn't believe that they're actually looking to sell.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, people joke around, you got a dollar, I got a dollar. Um, the question looms, right, for a heritage brand like
Hmm.
Four Roses, one that arguably kind of kept the name going during the 80s and 90s as it was exported to Japan. Japan actually kept that alive. Kieran, obviously the founder, $1 billion, that's about right for, one of the heritage brands. And the question looms, is there a European player that would
Hmm.
be interested in buying that? That's
Yeah,
pretty tough when Campari owns Turkey. The other players own, Rabbit Hole and all the other things that go along with that and the Pernod Ricard portfolio. So it's going to be very interesting. I think it's got to be private equity that comes in and picks that up. But, it's an interesting day when a $1 billion
Yeah,
heritage
oh,
brand's up for
yeah.
sale, because that's not going to happen ever again.
I was shocked, man.
History for sure.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so that's how it started. Was Lauren started building this whole plan for her dad, right? And it got to a point where she was putting so much work in. She's like, "Well, if I'm doing this much work, we should be sharing this with people, right?" And so then it was, okay, we got all these distilleries listed, right? So she started reaching out to each and every one of them. And over the course of a few months, it was, speaking to the master distillers, speaking to the owners and setting this up and getting everyone on board with it. Everyone we spoke to was very, for it and to get the business to support each other and push forward, the craft side that Arizona offers. And so it kind of took off from there. But that was the first arrow was, Lauren doing all the
I
research.
wanted to make sure I got the okay from everyone, even whether or not they offered like the discount that we'll go over in a little bit, but just wanted to make sure that they were aware that we're starting this and that this is a fun thing to get people exploring all parts of Arizona and seeing things that they haven't seen before while experiencing great bourbon. But yeah, I had to make sure I got a hold of every single person. I'm like, this is not happening unless I get a hold of everyone. And I finally did. There's a funny story about one that we'll probably cover in a little bit. But once I did, I'm like, all right, this is a go. And then it was like stage 2, start pumping out these posters and chips and get the word out there, which is what we're still trying to do. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
so 100%. So you have the map in front of you, and I don't think people realize how north and south and
Right?
east and west
Yeah.
Arizona is. It is a girthy state.
There's
You
a
can go a lot of different ways in the state itself.
Yep.
there's a good saying here for people in Phoenix, and it's that Phoenix is 2 hours from Phoenix. And it's like a really accurate statement, because no traffic from where we live driving to Mesa. I mean, it's a good hour and 25 minutes, and we're still
Yeah.
part of Phoenix, right? So
Mhm.
it's funny, and traffic hours, like it's easily 2.5, 3 hours to get to the other side of town. So people don't realize, most cities, major cities, when you think like cities like us, 5 million plus, right? They build up, and we don't. We build out. So like our
Yeah.
downtown's relatively small, but everything is spread out,
Yeah, I would say Phoenix is the Atlanta of the West, right? Same
Totally.
same way, or Nashville even, right?
Yeah.
They've all kind of done, these things for our listeners here on the East Coast. If you've not been to Phoenix, and Phoenix consists of quite a few cities, right? Like
Yeah.
in the area, right? And you host, obviously Tempe's right in the middle of that, one of the largest
Mhm.
college towns, and you have Scottsdale and all the other things right around there that people know and love, and like you can throw out a bunch and you'll throw a dart and you'll pretty much hit the same part of the map. But then obviously people come and tour and they go to Sedona. And
Yep.
obviously the big thing to do is to go to the canyon, right? You got to
Yeah.
go to the Grand Canyon and marvel at that. But that's pretty much north and south. Flagstaff's on that route too.
Mhm.
There's a lot of east and west that people don't explore in the state either.
Yeah.
So for someone who's coming there, where are you going? I mean, it looks like everything's kind of right up and down that
Mhm.
highway or interstate
Yeah.
there.
Got some
Does
outlet.
everything kind of pretty much live in that north and south kind of ideology?
Yep. Yeah. So just to say, like what he was saying, how spread out we are. So 6 right here is pretty much where we live. That was the only
Mm.
distillery we knew of before making this. And then you go all the way down here, and that's Tempe Mesa, where you're saying a lot of population and ASU lives. But yeah, then you have Grand Canyon, which is right north of 10 here, Williams, Flagstaff, Prescott, and then south you have Tucson. So majority is just that one line there with a little outlier in Kingman, which you're only going to go to probably if you're on your way to Vegas, but we're hopefully going to get our way there soon. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're right.
So of the 13, have you made a stop to all 13?
Not yet. We're almost there. We've hit
2
9,
left. Yeah,
9,
or 3
3,
left.
4.
4, yeah.
We're getting there. Like I said, Kingman we haven't hit up
A
yet.
lot of them.
We did go to Elgin's. Those are the ones way south in Tucson.
Mhm.
There's a few in Tempe and Mesa because we do live all the way up in Anthem, which is again like an hour and a half from these places. But yeah, I think we're at like 9 or 10. So we have 8 bottles in front of us. We got one more hiding. So 9 bottles officially that we have from these places. And it's been
Awesome. So
amazing.
yeah, so that's the one thing that's really interesting that I find about craft distillation, especially in a hot, arid climate,
Mhm.
right? Like Arizona. Now, obviously, people don't really know this or pay attention to it, but the elevation gain when you get up to Flagstaff is quite a bit, right? So you
Yeah.
can go from a very hot climate in the southern part of the state to getting it cold, and there'll be snow and all that types of stuff in the northern parts of the state. So are most people using traditional 53 gallons? Are there like hodgepodge where they're using small format barrels? Like how are they balancing out the very interesting temperature from a climate perspective that Arizona brings to creating
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. Most of the tours we've been on, most of these places do make like beer, wine, or other spirits. So luckily, they do have a big enough place. Obviously, nowhere near the scale of Kentucky, but big enough to do make really big batches. I'm not exact on maybe 50 gallons. I don't know, but
The barrels are standard. There's no
Yeah.
one out here is using 10-gallon barrels or anything. They're all using the 53, 55-gallon barrels
still
for
on a
bourbon.
small batch scale. And that's what I'm trying to when
The
we're
rick houses aren't the size of the ones in Kentucky. That's
yeah.
I guess that's the question she's kind of posing here or getting at is, the rick houses are much smaller. They're not these billion-dollar distilleries. They're just talking about like Four Roses where they have, warehouse space that is that large. They are craft and they do have quite a bit, but not, wild turkey where they got 10 different rick houses with 100,000 barrels apiece in them. They're not that large.
Yeah. No,
But
for sure.
in sense, what you're getting with that is small batch products or even single barrel because of that. And so that's what I try to emphasize here is like almost all of these are going to be small batch or single barrel because that's all they can really fit or do. And so you're going to get a slightly different flavor profile with each bottle, but they're all going to be amazing because the master distiller's picking them out. Just like if you were to go to Four Roses and get a single barrel, like pick out there, it's I don't know. That's why I think it's a little better. Like you're getting consistency with Kentucky, but you're getting different flavor profiles and personalities out of the ones here in Arizona.
Yeah, you get a lot of batch variation and a lot of different
Mhm.
things to create it. It's not like a house profile like you have with Woodford Reserve, right? That's a house profile. They know what they're blending to every time, and they're
Perfect.
going to try to get consistency across batches. When you're producing maybe between 5 and 25 barrels a week,
Mhm.
so like some of these craft are, your batches are going to be different. Are you palletized? Are you ricked? Are you pumping humidity? Are you not pumping humidity? Right? There's a lot of questions that I, as a consumer, would love to know. And getting down there myself is kind of one of the things that I think about is how do I get down there and understand the culture and the connection to that. And that's where a lot of this conversation stems from is it's not like, hey, like it's only the Arizona Bourbon Trail. Like this is going to be something that, hopefully we can connect and then connect to the
Mhm.
distilleries ourselves and bring light to what's happening in Arizona. And that's for every state. We, just talk to a random guy in Idaho, right? It's all about connections. Like, and so that's what, I hope out of this is it's not just a one-off conversation about the Arizona Bourbon Trail. It's a conversation that leads to whatever brand is interested in having a conversation, having a platform to talk about their bourbon and their other spirits, their whiskeys that they may be creating. Which leads me to my question. What was the first one that you tried in Arizona, right? And just because it's the first doesn't mean your favorite, but what was the first Arizona bourbon that you all tried?
So technically, first would be Carefree, but this was before I made the Arizona Bourbon Trail because this one's literally 10 miles away from us, so it's the
Okay.
closest one. So we went to this place when we found out it existed and had their bourbon. But the first one that we went to after I made this is Outlaw in Tempe, right on like next to Tempe Marketplace. And this place was awesome. They used to be Adventurous Stills. Outlaw bought them out. They're from Utah, so I don't know if you guys have ever.
So he buys all of his grain and everything here. Obviously in Phoenix, it's 110, 118, 120 some days. So you can't have a warehouse down here because you don't get the cold, right? You need the contraction of the barrels, right? So he actually owns another distillery in Utah. So he buys everything here and then ages it in Utah where he gets the weather and then brings it back down here is the way he operates. It's distilled, in Utah, but bottled in Tempe. I guess the way you would have to put it. But again, the products he buys is all here. A lot of people don't know Arizona. They think we're hot and dry, but like we're a huge agricultural hub. Like we make
Mm-hmm.
so many different agricultural products and for a lot of different states. And it's most of our revenue for our state is from farming.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like everything about whiskey is an agricultural
Hmm.
process, right? It's either a byproduct of obviously the end spirit is a byproduct of the agriculture, or it's the grain, the corn, the wheat, the barley, the rye, whatever it is, that goes into these mash bills, then to be fermented, and then that's the science component. And then obviously, what we have after fermentation and distillation is what we call bourbon
Yep.
after it touches new oak cooperage, right? Let me say all of those things for anyone who may be a first time listener to this. bourbon has to be, distilled within a certain parameter at a certain, can't go in any higher than 125 proof, and, must be in a new charred oak barrel and made in America, right? That's the most
Right.
important part of that. Bourbon cannot be
Kentucky.
made anywhere else, just like champagne cannot be made out of Champagne, France,
France.
so on, so forth. So that was your first one. What's been the most unique one that's kind of been like, wow, that's funky, that's different, that, it's like really challenged your flavor profile?
Let's learn from.
I was gonna say they all have their own stories, so it's really hard to pick one.
Yeah.
I say one of the ones that I was a big learning process for me is you're talking elevation earlier in Flagstaff, and I'm sure you've heard of this, but obviously higher elevations, technically the bourbon doesn't have to age technically as long for how far it gets. So
Here.
Jeff,
Yeah,
Jeff the
here.
master distiller that works at Grand Canyon Distillery, they make this out of blue corn, so that's one, makes it a little sweeter, but also because it's at that elevation at 2 years, he says it equivalates to 3 or 4 at like a normal elevation area. And so I thought that was an interesting fact. And then this is like one of the smoothest bourbons. I'm drinking it right now, actually. One of the smoothest ones I'll drink. I like to drink neat, so it's nice to have something where it's just smooth and can probably drink it a little faster than I should. And then their bottles are absolutely gorgeous. They have the Sierra Nevada mountains carved out in the bottom.
Oh,
So they
very
put a lot
cool.
of thought into their bottles, which a lot of these companies do. But yeah, this one we did about a month ago, and we went camping up there at Williams, and it was awesome. So that's one of my favorite. He might have a different story, but
Yeah, what about you, Dem?
Well, I like them all. Favorites are hard, right? If we're gonna stick with Arizona, like you mentioned Sedona earlier. I really like Redwall. They're up in Sedona. This place is fantastic. You were talking about just whiskey earlier with like Whiskey Del Bach. Ron, the owner here, he was the one we were saying had some interesting stories. We are trying to get a hold of everyone, and Ron's out there. Ironically, Ron was in the middle of the Atlantic,
yeah. He sails half the year. So
he is a master distiller at Redwall, and it is funny because he works most of the year, and then for 3 months during the summer when it's too hot to be here, he's out sailing his boat, while everything's aging. And we're trying to get a hold of him. And he's like, I was over the Titanic, like when you guys are trying to talk to me. Like, it's really hard to get in touch with somebody when they're out that far in the ocean, And so he's a really fun guy. But the product here is one of my favorites. I love it. He makes a good product. They have the heat and cold. They get the elevation, very similar to Kentucky, but he does make one of the best.
you were saying European companies, and I believe he gets his corn. Where was it from?
He's the only one here that doesn't get his corn from the state. He buys his corn overseas. He actually buys it from Europe. So he gets his grain from overseas. So where most people are paying 70 cents a pound,
corn.
He's paying $3.70 a pound, But it's kind of what sets him a little bit apart from everyone else, in my opinion. But if I was gonna go full Arizona, like I really like AZ Distilling, like this one, Copper City, and they make a bottled and bond. And his product, if you want to just stick with like, okay, everything's from Arizona, I like his stuff a lot.
He's a native.
That's cool.
So make sure all of his ingredients are only Arizona.
Everything is Arizona that goes in that bottle from start to finish, and they do make bottled and bond products, so he makes some quality stuff.
No, that's awesome. I love, the grain to glass story is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, because people want to highlight their farmers and their relationships with their farmers. And so there's a variety of different ways to do that, right? It's to source locally, or it's to source your own grain, or to use heirloom grain, right? So there's a lot of ways to do it, which is really interesting. It's going back to the guy in Sedona, one, that's like one of the most gorgeous drives that you can have coming in off the interstate and going into Sedona on a nice day. If you can time it when you're going in, like as the sun's going down, even more beautiful. But it is a windy road. So be on your P's and Q's and stay in Sedona that night. Don't try to drive out. The other thing is, that guy getting non-GMO corn, right? Like he's getting a very specific thing. If you're going to get corn outside of the United States, which is one of our number one crops, right? Obviously, you are getting a like yellow number 2 dent corn. Like you're not getting that. You're getting some other varietal of that, which is very interesting. So I'm sure his whiskey, his bourbon is quite unique, because corn can make all the difference in the world. Some corn's a little more, obviously sweeter. Some corn's not as sweet, right? So that's really cool. So if I were to say, come to Arizona and I wanted to start the Arizona Bourbon Trail, you've sent me, one of the packages. But what can a member get if they sign up and they go and they get they're like, hey, I want to get connected to this. What does the member receive?
Great question. So when they get the poker chip and the poster, they present this chip at each distillery or whichever one they want to start at, and then they get a one-time discount at each of them, which range from 3-cent flights to 20% off bourbon products. Like they all have their own thing, BOGO cocktails, and things of that nature. And honestly, like the chip, as I was explaining to like so many people this past week and that we talked to, it pays for itself in like one visit. Especially if you buy a bottle or two, because these bottles aren't on the cheaper side because again they're like small batch single barrel. But yeah, if you get a couple bottles and a couple cocktails, like $15, you're gonna save $20 to $30 in one visit. But yeah, they each have their one time, so all on the back of the poster has all the discounts that they offer. I'm working on an app right now. So hard. I'm not technically like technology's
We don't get paid
a
for
struggle for me. So I've been trying to figure out why it's not working. But the goal down the road is have an app so that it'd be nice. It's fun to carry this around like a roadmap, but all of us have our phones on us, and it's just easier that way. So down the road, I'd like to create an app, and that way they can see the discounts, check in, and put notes in there what they liked, what they didn't like, maybe even add a photo, things of that nature. But
map.
I probably went way beyond your question, but
No,
that's
no, you're fine. The future's always good. And you talked about like scoring and rating. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
obviously, beer has, I forget what the thing's called where people can rate all their beers. But we've been working on a commuting scoring guide,
Oh,
for anybody to, score and rate bourbon. Like we want people and whiskey overall, just whatever it is from a bourbon, whiskey, brown spirit perspective. And that's something we're trying to do is create a thought process, because not every bourbon or whiskey is a 99. That's what we see a lot. We see 97s, 93s. What's the standard to that? What's your standard deviation? What's your median? What's your mean? Like all of those things are very important. And so if we only see 90s, we don't know what's good and bad. So we're on the hunt for doing those things ourselves. If you want to create an app that's ambitious, I don't have the ambition for that. And if I did, it would be with Claude AI. And this is not an advertisement, but I'd be using Claude to design it, because that's what I hear is a good AI app for designing mobile apps. There's my one piece of advice that I don't
I'll
really.
look into that. Right now I'm trying
Yeah.
Glide, and it had an AI component for most of it, and then at the end it's like upgrade to use more, and I'm like, no, I want to keep going. So yeah, we'll see.
No. Yeah.
Have you
We
noticed?
got it. Thanks.
Have you noticed with what you started for people rating the bourbon, like different? Obviously, everyone has a different flavor profile. So is that showing like in what you guys are seeing already?
Yeah, so we're starting to see, different variations. We've only got a couple that have been cross-pollinated.
Hmm.
And, the goal is to get 500 ratings. And, we can go from there to really kind of just first get the math right from a standard deviation perspective.
Right.
And then we'll work in on the hooks and all those things to like merge scores and so on and so forth. But I think the most important thing is with rating is defining what your characteristics are. Nose, palate, finish is subjective,
Yeah.
right? But there's objective things to this. What's the availability? That's objective, right? Is it available inside or outside of the state? Is it an allocation? Yes or no, right? Availability should play a factor in the score, because if I can't drink it, why do I care how good it is? And the other thing, that's me personally. People can disagree with Jake Lewellen all they want. That's my personal opinion. The other thing is, what's the value, right? There's got to be a value to this. The flavor profiles you get plus the availability give you value. So, for instance, for the longest time, people would say a 10-year bourbon at $10 a year is a great value, right? Now, 10-year bourbons could be $500-600, just depending on how it's run. Is it a Willet Purple Top, or is it, Joe Blow MGP 10-year pick, right? Vast difference in pricing.
Right.
But what is the value for that? My thing is still, if you can fall under that, close to that 10-year, $10 per year category, you're pretty good. So, there's a lot we're still figuring out. We're early. We got like 75 or so. We're 4 weeks into this. So doing pretty good amongst like 4 or 5 people, but we definitely need more people to join in on that.
I had him. I was using his YouTube, and I'm like, we'll sign up. So we'll look into that and try to help you guys if we can at all too. Just let us know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, no time like the present. If you're interested in doing the community scoring guide, types community scoring guide, and we'll send you an email and let you in on that. But guys, I really want to say thank you for spending some time with me on a Sunday evening to talk about the Arizona Bourbon Trail. I hope this is the first of many conversations, and maybe in person one day.
Yeah.
If you could tell the people, where can they find out more about Arizona Bourbon Trail?
Definitely. Yeah, we have a Facebook page. We also have an Instagram. And then to both of those will have a link to get the chip and the poster to get your discounts. Even if you don't live here and you visit, I think a lot of people visit here pretty often. It's definitely worth it. Like I said, it pays for itself in one visit. But yeah, Facebook and Instagram is our biggest one, just Arizona Bourbon Trail, and you'll find us right there.
Awesome. Well, excited for this, excited to see how many different distilleries that you all can add and how Arizona grows from here. And excited to try some Arizona bourbon myself. Really appreciate you all joining. And as always, if you are interested in learning more about the Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to the Bourbon Lens channel on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X, wherever you get your social media. And make sure that you are checking YouTube Thursdays always for Thursday Thoughts. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks, Jake.